The final thing we're going to talk about is code review. Technically, what is code review when we talk about code review? So basically, a developer A writes code and asks his peers to kind of review it, right? That's essentially what it is overall. It's certainly a careful line-by-line critique, so you can only go through each line. It should happen in a non-threatening context. It's not good if things are threatening. The goal should be cooperation, not threat finding. Generally, most mature development teams will have some form of code review process, which is good. So that defines code review. Benefits. If you do it already, you should pretty much know the benefits. But the more eyes you have on a snippet of code, you'll find more bugs, right? You can enforce coding standards via code review. So if you have a senior developer with a bunch of junior developers, it's easy to kind of enforce coding standards that way. Code review works great for mentoring, especially if you're trying to get some new people set up on a project. It works, it works really well. I find that's pretty much like my favorite and most important benefit of code review essentially is the mentoring aspects. And for those of us who work in a kind of distributed fashion, which a lot of us do in open source, it's kind of a good alternative to, say, pair programming, right? So it's kind of like an asynchronous, form of pair programming. Specifically, like I mentioned before, Garrett's the code review system, used by the Android project. Initially, it was created to use by the Android project, but now it's being used by companies such as like Red Hat, SAP, Google, and a few others. Out there. Recently the Assembla project offers Garrett as a code review system if you use Assembla for your project. I'll give a little brief history because I always find the history a little entertaining. So originally, Garrett came out of Google, right? When Google first started, everything was on Perforce, so it kind of was painful. But they had a code review system called Mylyn, right? It was all proprietary. Pretty much all to use internally, tied exclusively to the Google infrastructure. Well, that kind of sucks, and they did the next generation called Redfill, and that was based on Subversion. It was open source, and it integrated well with Google App Engine, so things were scalable, check everything in a big table, and Google's happy. So eventually, Git started to get a little more popular, and Garrett came around. It was pretty much started initially as a fork. They use JGit under the covers to talk to Git repositories and GUID to do the actual UI. So it's open source, and it's fully under the Apache 2 license, and actually developed as technically it's developed as part of the Android project. So it's in the Android repository. The philosophy with Garrett is essentially one branch, one feature. The master branch within Garrett only contains reviewed and approved changes. So the master always moves from a good state to a better state. That's the philosophy of Garrett. And generally, changes can only be abandoned if there's changes dependent on you that are not approved yet. You can technically check that change out. The life cycle of a change with Garrett is that you generally create a local topic branch that you work on. You commit the change and then you push it for review, right? There's also some automated verification you could do when you push your changes for review to Garrett. So you could technically think of Garrett as simply like a proxy server for a Git repository, right? So you push to Garrett, and then Garrett will notify people to review your change, right? You'll have developers, and you could also do some automated verification. So there's a couple plugins for Garrett that essentially, one of the ones we use within the eGit and JGit products and within most of Eclipse.org at some point is the Hudson trigger plugin, essentially, or Garrett trigger plugin. And essentially, when a developer pushes a change for review, basically Garrett will go kick off the build on a Hudson server with those changes. And basically, what happens is Hudson comes back and votes, +1 or -1. On the change based on build results. So you kind of have like a little robot code, which is cool because if someone pushes a change and it breaks breaks the build or somehow impacts something bad, you get that notification pretty quickly before any code ends up in the master branch. Eventually what happens is, you push your change, there's some refinement that goes on based on the changes you push, and eventually, you push new patch sets, and eventually you get enough votes that says this is good, and then eventually it gets pushed. You push it, you tell Garrett to submit the change, and Garrett sort of handles all the server-side merging and pushes your changes to the sort of the blessed, the main Git repository. So essentially, here's a workflow diagram. Essentially, your author pushes the change. Garrett notifies all the reviewers of there's some code to review. You review the code, you comment and vote, and then eventually, if there's enough votes, you push it. It's pretty simple. If you've worked with code review systems in the past, it's pretty standard. So essentially, here's a sort of a shot of the UI. I guess it's a little bit hard to see up there, but essentially, you end up with a bunch of reviewers, a bunch of patch sets that represent all the discussion that happened based on comments, and then eventually you just push the change. So this one was quite a long one, 18 patch sets back and forth. So I'm going to do a little demo of Garrett, and in particular the Mylyn reviews project. So for Garrett, if we actually look at Garrett, let's look at Garrett. What do you got here? Here's the instance of Garrett running on Eclipse. Pretty much just has a bunch of changes, and pretty much the changes that are currently open. You kind of have the votes here. You have -1, or you get a check. So like for this one, an example, you could see that Hudson came back with a plus vote, so that's good. So if you look at the comments, essentially what Hudson does is they'll immediately go kick off a build based on those changes. This one failed, so that was not good. But eventually, I guess another build was triggered, and eventually had a success, and eventually Hudson votes +1 or -1 if the build fails. So you essentially look through differences. So this one's not interesting because it's in the file. You could look at clone operation here and see the changes that happened, right? And then you could go in here and add comments, right? Like this is bad. For this variable, and so publish your comments and all that good stuff. So essentially, that's Garrett is this code review system. So there's some tooling now in Eclipse that integrates Garrett, and it's called Garrett Mylyn reviews for Garrett. So essentially now what we have is, let's see, let's go to task list here. This one. Oh, here we go. So Mylyn's all about the task list. So now in your task list, I pretty much created a query for my Garrett repository that returns all the sort of open issues. So essentially, I could go. Let's go find an interesting one. So let's do this one. So I can look at this change. I pretty much see everything I would see within the web UI here. Here's a little description. I have the reviewers. I see Hudson had put it -1. I guess the build failed. So Hudson goes to voted as -1. You could see the files contained within the patch set here. So you could open things up and see changes easily within Eclipse. So these are pretty minor changes here. Just a new little static method was added. The cool thing you could do is you could actually fetch these changes. So with Git, you're constantly fetching stuff, right? So you do fetch, and it will automatically fetch these specific changes, create a local branch within Git, and fetch these changes into that branch. So essentially, I was on the master branch before, and now I'm on this branch that represents this specific change. change had a new method or a new class called UI utils. So I go there and pretty much I have access to the code locally. I can test it, I can run it, and eventually I could publish my comments, and I could say +2 looks good for me, and then hit OK and submit. So I pretty much now comment and work with Garrett all within Eclipse. So it's quite nice this way. I'll pretty much wrap things up because I'm running out of time. But sort of to conclude is the Mylyn project was restructured. It's a sign of maturity in my opinion. There's so many different integrations out there for Mylyn now, and hopefully by kickstarting the builds and reviews project, we'll get to see some nice fancy integrations like integrating with maybe Bamboo on the build side. And, if someone wants to add stuff like a review board to the reviews project, that would be great. So, Garrett is really a nice, code review tool. So if you're using Git and you don't have a code review tool in place, I'd highly recommend looking at Garrett. It's quite a sweet piece of technology, and I'm excited with what the future holds for Mylyn because I remember when I started using Git and Garrett, I was kind of depressed that, and even Hudson, that I was always like tabbing the browser and looking at crap in Hudson and seeing things and stuff. It's a lot more enjoyable when I kind of work with everything inside of Eclipse, so it just makes my life a little bit easier when things are completely integrated and I can create, tasks from build failures and all this good stuff. So that pretty much wraps stuff up. There's some Git resources if you're not really a Git user yet. I highly recommend going to the Git website, and even better yet, watching Linus's talk at Google. He's quite entertaining. So you can Google that video and watch his little diatribe on subversion and other stuff. It's quite fun. And there's a free book out there called ProGit, which I